Hello, Western Civilization 105. Welcome to week 6. I just want to mention that I have been very happy with the work that I've seen this semester when I consider how challenging it is to cover so much and have a job and a family and all these different things that you're trying to do. And so, sometimes I've intervened and I've given you feedback in the discussions or with your papers, but I hope that you realize now, yes, you've been learning a lot. You've been tackling a lot of things that you were not necessarily exposed to. You may still have some things, you might be confused about a few things. You still might maybe not fully understand what all these different ideologies have meant, but you're on the path to get more grounded in these very important topics that are still extremely pertinent to this day. And so before I talk a little bit more about that, I just want to mention something about late work. So if you remember in the last announcement I had, all of you that had agreements with me to turn in late work had to have it in by this last Sunday. Now, some of the students already wrote to me last night and they got approval for late work coming in now. So let me reiterate, unless you and I have had a conversation this last Sunday or today, you cannot just automatically turn in any more late work. We have to have a discussion if I can fit that in. We have just ran out of time. So I'm not saying don't contact me, and I want to make clear that if you've contacted me and I've agreed to something and now it seems like I'm not respecting that, there's a very likely chance that I have mixed you up with some other student. I have so many students and many of you I've never even met before. So please be proactive with your schooling and with me, and let me know. I'm never going to attack you for communicating with me any kind of grievance or confusion. I'm really doing my best to support all of you, but the best thing you can do is communicate. I will let you know also, I just had a situation where a student texted me. I thought it was another student, and then I wrote back and I called, and there was some serious miscommunication because I was confusing this person with another one. That kind of stuff happens. So give me the benefit of the doubt that I'm actually working with you, and if my behavior or my position towards your work, or if I said that I will let you turn in late work and I gave you a 0 and you're confused, call me up or write to me and we can resolve that, okay? But right now, again, no late work can be turned in unless we've had a discussion and you're going to be approved. This is the last week of class, and the next week is the final, and the final will be, I believe, on a Wednesday. I'll get back to you on that soon. But now keep in mind, the final is only 25 points. I will do more of a discussion about the final at the end of this week. Success in this class and the grade that you want to have is it really has to do with if you've done the majority of the work up till now. So don't stress about the final. Stress about where you're at with the work that we've had for this cram course that we're almost done with, okay? So that's the most important thing that I want to stress to you. And then I just want to say a few things. So you see that we've now covered quite a bit of material, and we went over the World War I, World War II, the Cold War, and now. And there is so much information that I had to leave out that is no less important than some other information. There gets to be a point where I really have to struggle to decide like what is going to be the most important thing to expose you all to. Up until recently, I ended this class on really focusing on the refugee crisis, immigration, and the rise of populist movements and the far right and ultra-right nationalism in response to all of that. And that still is a relevant topic. I did have this somewhat addressed in one of the videos. But of course, Russia invading the Ukraine is a huge game changer. And we really had to end this class based on looking into that. And we have to end this really seeing the position of China and looking at the U.S. position on Taiwan and kind of seeing how, the issue of Ukraine and Putin and NATO and the United States, and looking at the position of China and Taiwan and the United States, right? These are very similar things, and we're talking about some issues with superpowers. And what's important to realize is that if you notice now, the socialist camp, the communist world, basically fell apart and has very relative little impact on global politics now. If you look at the article that I had on Lee Kuan Yew in China, you will see that while China calls its economy socialism with Chinese characteristics, that is essentially a euphemism for a communist party with a socialist defined state actually switching over to capitalism, okay? And they've switched to capitalism, though, where the state is still the shot caller, okay? And so it's done differently than in the United States, but there's a reason why so many things are made in China now. China has become an economic success and powerhouse based on shifting their economics, and also what China has been able to do is something that Russia, the Soviet Union, was not able to do. When the Soviet Union basically reformed or tried to restructure the state, you see how the whole thing fell apart. Gorbachev, if he wanted to keep the Soviet Union together, which I've actually seen him in public speak, and he did want it to be together, he is the failure of that system. I mean, he wasn't why it was having so many problems, but perestroika and glasnost put together with what he tried to do basically caused the whole thing to fall. And then you had somebody like Yeltsin who just helped facilitate that. And when Russia fell apart, they became a total mess. And China was able to observe that and make sure that that didn't happen to them. And instead, they were able to facilitate their own reforms into making them a superpower. But again, I want to point out, the socialist world then, I mean, what do we have? Europe has really reformed a lot, and they're not as socialistic as they used to be. They still have a much more socialist influenced set of programs, which is called the welfare state. And for me as an American, when I spent 3 months in Europe, it was clear to me that the workers had a much higher quality of life than we do out here in terms of what you would expect it to mean, where the state can provide certain things for the workers, even though they paid a lot in taxes, and that's putting it lightly. But my friends in Europe didn't mind paying all the taxes because they saw that come back to them in forms of childcare, free education, free health care, free in the sense that it's not coming out of your paycheck but out of your taxes, okay? And that's a whole other topic. Not necessarily socialist, but influenced by those trends. But here's my whole point. The world has seen a retreat. So the socialist world is a ghost, a shell of itself. But we still see in the United States certain political persuasions acting as if there's always a socialist specter everywhere. Okay, yes, Bernie Sanders identified as a democratic socialist and AOC and all that, but how successful have they been in changing the Democratic Party, so, for example, to actually take on those labels? And if you look, when I was in Europe, people would say that Hillary Clinton's economic policies would be considered right-wing in Europe. Keep that in mind, okay? We're not talking about social issues, but the economic policy of the mainstream Democratic Party's economic platform would be viewed as right-wing in Western Europe to this day, okay? And I've did some research on that. That's true. So we are the least socialist of the Western countries, and yet we're constantly being bombarded with this idea from certain sectors of our society that there's a communist, there's a Maoist, there's this somewhere coming at us. And every time you do anything leftist or something's authoritarian, they associate it with that. Simultaneously, there's another political branch that likes to call everything fascist, when, of course, we saw that there is a very specific type of politics that comes out of fascism, that just being conservative wouldn't inherently make you a fascist, okay? Like, just by just looking at the definition. So I'm hoping you've been able to take a look at that and see how sloppy and underdeveloped our political discourse has been in the United States, and maybe why we've been caught off guard by a lot of things going on an international level. And so I really hope that you look at that. I hope that you start to value nuance, to understand that there are some things that are not 100% all bad and all good, and maybe also not always super clear cut, and that it requires much more thought and us to slow ourselves down a little bit before we pass the judgments that we so easily do, on a day-to-day level, right? And I'm guilty of all those kind of things too. I've also changed my mind and position on many subjects. So one thing that I would like to recommend, and it's a book, and it is a Marxist, all right? So, but he's dead now. His name is Samir Amin. He was an Egyptian, French-Egyptian writer. He wrote a book called Eurocentrism. I got this one from the library here, so I don't have the cover. And his name is Samir Amin, A-M-I-N. And why I just thought I would recommend this, or to throw this out there, I actually disagree with some of his positions that he had politically in a big way. Again, the nuance, right? But he was trying to understand the inequality of wealth in the world and the disparity of everything. And he's one that's coined the term Eurocentrism in the way that it got to be used much more later on. Now, he didn't use it in the way of simply saying anything that's European is bad. He's tried to explain the imbalance of the world order, okay? And so he was a part of something called world systems analysis, which is a little bit different. In other words, he was not an orthodox Marxist. He critiqued aspects of Marxism, but he tried to use Marxism to try to understand and explain on a macro level how we get to where we're at. And so with world systems analysis, which that particular idea doesn't come just from Marxists, but it basically argues that the entire world is under one type of system mainly, or one of the main ones, and it's Eurocentric. In other words, as Europe developed capitalism and became the center of capitalism, and the West itself and the United States then becomes a part of that, that is the center, that's the core of the economic world. And then the outside of that world is the periphery. And he kind of talked about dependency theory, and what he's basically saying is, we have a myth, and even people on the left have had this myth, along with others from the right. So basically he's kind of saying, so many people, that poor countries are poor because they're not emulating the West properly. In other words, they're doing politics wrong. And if they followed the methods of democracy and capitalism in the way that the West has imposed on the world, they would find success. But what he's arguing is that this is a lie, that the countries are poor because they're a part of the world system that it imposes itself on them, and it makes them poor, that there are economic policies that are imposed and military policies that are imposed on smaller nations that keep them on the periphery, that their poverty isn't a result of their not emulating the West. It's the Eurocentric aspect of the total global system that actually makes them this way. And the only way that they can ever break from that is not by emulating the West, but delinking or breaking completely out of the system. And he mentioned this as a challenge. Now, I don't know. These are the kind. When someone makes a theory like this, I still have to kind of sit on this myself more and think about, the truth of that. But why I wanted to recommend this and why I brought this up is if you're interested in history and current politics, in our current American cultural wars where we're all at each other, in the meantime, there's a lot of stuff going on outside of the United States. And the world, the way it is a very complex place. And whatever your political persuasion, I hope you put more deep thought into trying to analyze what has got the world to where it's at now and what to make of it. And so, in that context, I invite you to read a book like what I just recommended, or delve into this to maybe just somebody else that tries to explain the world the way it is and help clean up your thinking a little bit as compared to what you're seeing on the news. Our mainstream news is very low quality, and a lot of alternative news is not much better. So please don't fall for this. Okay, yes, CNN, Fox News, all this stuff is garbage. But then I have friends who are listening to some guy in a basement on, BitChute or some other alternative media form, and it's not that they're necessarily all wrong, but I'm not seeing the quality that much better. And so it's a challenge, right, to find quality information and to know what to think. I don't have an easy solution for that, but if you actually care about the world, you can't be lazy. You have to be proactive, and you have to dig deep. So that's it. I spoke too long. I apologize. But I do think we're in a very important time now to be on top of ourselves, because as a crisis, as more issues emerge, the political trends are going to swing us into very extreme positions, and we're going to need to really be careful, because we can be pushed into political trends that we maybe will regret later on. A lot of civilizations have faced that, as we see with World War II, from all sides, right? And so on. So everybody have a great week, and we'll be in touch. This is our last week together. I hope you enjoy it, even though it's very serious information. And please contact me if you have any questions.